So thank you, ColorComm, for giving We Communications an opportunity to host this really important and timely conversation. I hear we have over 200 folks who are signed up today. So that's a real strong indication that there's a hunger for a conversation like this. My name is Elizabeth Herrera Smith, and I am the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion for We Communications, which is one of the largest independently held PR agencies. I've been in this particular role for the last 4 years, and whew, can I just say, it has been a year for DEI. The backlash has been real, which is why it's more important than ever for us as women of color to invest in ourselves and to navigate our careers with intention. We've been hearing the refrain of DEI hire as it relates to Vice President Kamala Harris and other prominent leaders of color. And I say it is time to take back that narrative and own the value that we bring to our organizations. And that starts by investing in ourselves and making the time for career and leadership development opportunities. Yet, in the everyday busyness of work and life, how many of us have said to ourselves, I'll get to that someday? I will be the first to raise my hand and say, I am definitely guilty of that. I will also say that when I finally said yes to myself, it opened up a world of opportunity and it helped to propel me to where I am today. So now I want to introduce my esteemed panelists today. I am honored to be joined by two powerful women who have both said yes to investing in themselves. They'll give you some practical guidance today and share some personal stories about their own career journeys. First up is Sari D, founder of Nine of Us, which is a DEI consultancy. Sari introduced me to the Career Compass Leadership Development Program about 2 years ago, and I knew immediately that we had to bring this to our emerging BIPOC talent at We Communications. The 12-week program focuses on pragmatic and soft skills, as well as mindset work. As a woman of color, Sari brings a unique and nuanced perspective to coaching BIPOC talent, which is what makes her so damn effective. So thank you so much for joining us, Sari. I'm also honored to introduce my colleague, Jocelyn Jackson. She is Vice President of Creative Strategy at We, and she is also a Career Compass alum. Since joining We, Jocelyn has set the world on fire with her creativity and strategic mind. No one makes data look sexier than Jocelyn. I've been impressed with Jocelyn's focus on steering her career with intention, and I can't wait to hear what she has to share with us about her own journey. We'll reserve the last 10 to 15 minutes at the end of our session for Q&A from the audience, so let's get to it. Sari, before we dive into Career Compass, I'd love for you to share with this group the meaning behind the company name that you have, Nine of Us, because I've always loved this story.
Yes, thanks, Elizabeth. So Nine of Us is actually based on a Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote. She says, people ask me, when will there be enough women in the Supreme Court? And when I say nine, people are surprised, but there's been nine men and no one's ever questioned that. And because our focus is on elevating people of color and women of color in particular into corporate careers, that felt just wildly appropriate to me. I'm looking for a world where we don't even question the fact that the majority of companies are run by women.
Yeah, amen to that. Amen to that. So I think it's a good segue into the Career Compass program and why you developed it and what really sets it apart from other leadership programs, because I will tell you, it really is different from other programs that I've experienced in my career.
Yeah, so a little bit of background on myself. I'm an immigrant twice over. I moved from India to Australia when I was 9 years old. That's where I grew up. And then in my early 30s, I moved here to the US and I've lived here for the last 12, 13 years. And the real sort of light bulb moment was I peaked my corporate career. I was a senior director at Facebook. I was and when I took the job, I called my parents who were super excited because, they actually understood where I worked. They still didn't know what I did, but they understood Facebook, right? Like they understood where I worked. And my dad said, "When do you start?" And I said, "Well, we don't have a start date locked in yet. I'm still, negotiating." And there was a pause, and he said, "Honey, I think you should take the job. It's a very generous salary. And once you're in there, just work really hard and show them what a great employee you are. And then once you've proven yourself, you can ask for more money and negotiate more things." And that's just not how it works. But that was the best advice that my dad, who adores me, could give me. And I just wondered how many other people of color and women of color in particular were getting this advice or feeling this way internally. My husband was making more money than I was in his early 20s. He negotiated his internship. Like they weren't even paying him, and he managed to negotiate free accommodation, a food budget, right? Like he negotiates everything. And so it wasn't just that. It was also certain, like I would see the women on my team submit self-evaluations, and I was like, I know what you've done this year because I've managed you. And this self-evaluation is terrible. Like it sounds like you've hardly achieved anything. There's so many we sentences, the team sentence, right? Meanwhile, we were talking about this earlier, like mediocre white man energy. Like I would get self evals where I was like, wow, you really overinflated what you've achieved this year. There were all these unspoken skills. Like, how do you negotiate? How do you set boundaries? How do you navigate when you're trying to say no, but you still want to come across as a team player? And those are all these unspoken skills that it felt like my counterparts who'd grown up here, or my counterparts who had communities that had like long corporate careers and they could ask for advice from, had mastered, and I hadn't. And so, or I had, but the hard way. And so what we did was we polled, it's now 400 people from around the world, people of color who are in a mid stage of their career, and asked them, what do you need to get to the next stage? What skills are you missing? And put together a course that specifically focuses on how to negotiate, influence, write a self-evaluation, plan and map out your career, ask for a pay rise, and network. That I think Jocelyn will tell you, like one of the best parts of the program is that you're in a community with other people who are like you, in the same stage as you. Everyone cries at least once, right,
Oh
Jocelyn?
yeah, I definitely did more than once. I mean,
um, and you make friends for life, and this is your network, the start of your network. All these people will start to work elsewhere, and you will ping them when you need a job or advice or feedback. This becomes your network.
I have to say, sorry, your story about your dad deeply resonated with me because you were channeling my mom, Mama Berlina, in my ear every time I was up for a promotion or getting a raise. It was like, you should be really happy with that. And that feels like a lot. It's more than I ever made in my lifetime. And so I really appreciate it that you were able to push back on that notion and ask for more for yourself. The other piece that I want to build on and turn over to Jocelyn is you said something about how women evaluate themselves and how you were seeing this humility come through and how they were talking about their accomplishments. And before we started this conversation today, Jocelyn was just recounting how when she got promoted to vice president, she wasn't sure if she was going to do a big post on LinkedIn to celebrate it. And so, Jocelyn, tell me a little bit more about what was holding you back in that moment and why you decided to just take the leap and put it out there.
yeah, yeah, I don't consider myself someone who likes to brag, right? I like to achieve things, absolutely. I am, what you call a type A personality. So I'm always looking to, set a goal, achieve it, get after it, learn, grow, develop. I'm constantly on the go in that respect. But I also sort of like want to hide sometimes. So, as much as I had worked really hard for my promotion, and I absolutely did, when it happened, I was incredibly happy. I felt, accomplished, but I was like, oh, I'm just going to slide it under the radar. But I, got convinced to kind of just do a post, but I was like, I don't want to make it like I'm bragging. I want to kind of show everyone who follows me in my network, like the path that I've been taking myself and why it means so much to me that I've gotten to where I've gotten today. So that was kind of my tact that I took on it, and it actually I think worked really well.
It absolutely did, because that post blew up and I saw a very supportive network around you come in and celebrate you. And I think as women of color, we should celebrate ourselves and each other and lift each other up. And so I'm really glad that you had that extra nudge from your really supportive manager to just go out there and say it loud and proud. I got promoted because you earned it.
Yeah, it was a great feeling. It was very liberating, I will say.
So let's go back to what Sari was saying about the relationships that are built across Career Compass and some of the emotional energy that you all feed into each other to support one another as you are navigating your own careers. Tell us a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
It was it was part of the first cohort, which was like an incredible moment. And I think it came at the right time for where I was in my life and in my career. I had been doing research and analytics work for many, many years, really becoming an expert in that. But I was also kind of curious about like strategy work. I have a creative background. I'll talk about that in a little bit more in more detail. But I wanted to be able to try a little bit of everything, and I constantly want to be able to keep learning. But I hit a point where I'm like, I don't feel like I'm learning anything. I feel like, I'm doing what I do best. I'm doing it well. I'm good at it. But am I learning anything? Am I going to be able to stretch and grow? And so when the program came around and the opportunity came, I was like, oh yeah, this is amazing. And I think a lot of people that I was with in the cohort were sort of feeling similar ways, right? Or like, I don't know what's next. What's my next step? Where do I go from here? Unsure about how to get there as well. And also it's a safe space for other people of color who are just trying to advance themselves in their careers as well. And so over the course of how many weeks was it? Sorry, like 12
12
weeks.
weeks.
Wow.
It was a good commitment, and we had that we had the support and backing of our managers to be able to take that time out as well to do the program. We learned so much about ourselves, about what it is that we wanted, what it is that we sort of see for our future, when sometimes you don't take the time to actually sit and think about what it is that you want for yourself and put it into words and then put it into action. We learned about each other. We helped each other to grow and learn as well throughout that. And so, yeah, by the end of it, as Sari said, like we were doing like sort of a little bit of a circle and kind of talking to each other about what we liked about the program. And we all just were like a hot mess, but it was a beautiful hot mess because we were in something together, and we actually kept in touch, all of us that were in that first cohort, like kept in touch, would meet somewhat regularly because we'd formed this community that was like unbelievable.
I think that really speaks to the power of your network and mentorship and sponsorship. We talk a lot about that in the ColorComm community and why everyone should have a mentor and a sponsor, because I think when you get together with a group of your peers, you quickly discover that you're all dealing with the same general challenges and opportunities that come with leadership, and it can be very easy to feel alone in that. And so what I really like about the way this is structured is you build these bonds with your colleagues that you don't get to work with on a day-to-day basis, and can offer each other just a little bit of a different perspective on something that they might be facing.
Yeah. And we were just talking before this started about, what a swamp. I don't know if anybody else feels this. Please drop in the chat if you're experiencing this, but LinkedIn has felt like such a swamp lately of just like self-promotion and grossness. And what I love about this community is that like we just drop all of that. Like you are just yourself, like you are just yourself. You're surrounded by people who are also searching for that same authenticity. We talk in a really real way about our challenges, about our feelings of imposter, whatever it is. Yes, like I think that we're all craving that, right? That's like that place where we can just come and like drop the mask, drop the BS, and just be ourselves and be like, it's really hard right now, or I don't know where I'm going with my life right now, without needing all of the
I'm seeing a
LinkedIn.
lot of agreement in the chat.
Yeah,
Sorry. A
that
lot
is
of LinkedIn
cute.
can make you get into your feelings sometimes, and that is the truth. That is the truth.
Jillian, it's giving Instagram, but with a suit and tie.
No, I have felt that myself. I've seen it kind of evolve lately. I'm like, what's happening here on this platform?
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. When you think about some of the lessons and tools that Sari shared with you, Jocelyn, what's that one tool that was so essential to you coming out of the program? Or if you have more than one
I was
tool,
gonna
to
say
share that
there's
as
definitely
well.
more than one. Excuse me. But we as part of sort of our program together, we kind of went over several different topics that were really important to sort of getting you to the next level of your career development. And some of those things really sort of opened my eyes in a beautiful way. Understanding your purpose, like what are you meant to do? And what are you meant to do in this world? Who do you want to be when you grow up? And no matter where you are in your career, that's a question that you should be asking yourself because it can change and evolve. But so getting a sense of what I want to be, what's going to make me happy, what am I currently good at now, what can I start to become better at, and then what the world needs, right? So like a little bit of everything, kind of getting a sense of that. And it was actually sort of terrifying to do that exercise, right? Like I think we sort of think about what it is that we're doing and what we'd like to do, but people don't really think about that ever. They're like, I want to have a job, I want to make money, and that's important. But like, what do you want to do? Like, what would make you happy? Was a big part of that. And so, sitting down to write those goals and like figure out who I wanted to be in 5 years from now was like, oh, this is exciting, but very scary. I didn't know what that could look like. And I had to dream her up, like dream Jocelyn 5 years up. And I got really excited when I sort of dreamt it and wrote it down and it was in front of me. I'm like, oh, this is someone I could actually become. And it just sort of changed my viewpoint about what it is that I could do and achieve and offer to the world. Also talking about how you battle imposter syndrome, right? I have a bunch of friends, women of all, backgrounds and ethnicities who are like in really badass jobs right now who, say to me like, oh, I deal with imposter syndrome all the time. I'm like, I deal with it myself as well, but it's like, okay, like let's be real that the bar is not high. Or like we have, to Sari's point, like white men who are just like out there doing whatever because they think that they can. Like you're doing a great job. So like don't even pretend that like you are an imposter in this space. So all of those things were really great. And also talking about your personal story. Like I think we forget that as
Yeah.
employees, as people who work, that we're selling ourselves. We are our own brands. And so to be able to do that in a way that's compelling and brief to make someone want to get to know you a bit more is such a little known about skill, but it takes you so far in your career.
Sorry, what kind of barriers do you sometimes see people come into when they start the Career Compass program, and how do you help them break through those barriers to find their purpose and to squash down that imposter syndrome? I'm sure you see some sort of common threads throughout the cohorts that you've facilitated. So how do we break through those barriers?
Yeah, so we open the first activity or the first week's work is around your 5-year plan. So I'm not just like, here, write it down, right? Like there's a mission, like we go through a bunch of exercises, 6 or 7 different, all of which will give you the pieces. And then at the end, I'm like, okay, put all these pieces together, write your 5-year plan. And so many people say to me, like, oh, I can't plan for 5 years, or I don't know the answer. And I'm like, that in itself is a big deal that you can picture yourself in 5 years. I coach a lot of C-suite, right? Like CMOs at companies like Instagram and DoorDash, and all of them have plans for their careers. Nobody just drifts along. And I think drifting along is a guarantee towards a midlife crisis because many of us decide our careers when we leave college at 20, right? 21, whatever age that is. And 10 or 15 years later, you're a totally different person, hopefully, if you've done some work and some evolution and some growth. Have you stopped in the decade and a half and asked yourself, am I in the right place doing the right thing? And is this still what I really want? And so writing that 5-year plan is really critical. I also think that we never know what the future holds. And yet you wouldn't start a project at work without having some sort of plan or outcome or direction you want this to go. And your career is the most important thing that you're ever going to work on. This is how you put food on the table, a roof over your head, secure your kids' school, whatever it is that you're trying to do with your life, right? We need money to do it with. And so figuring out how you're going to do that in a way that doesn't destroy your mental health, that fulfills you. And then I really do believe that the fact that you exist means that you have something valuable to contribute. Like your existence just on its own is such a miracle. So like, what is it that you're supposed to be doing with your wild and beautiful life? And what a disservice to yourself and to everybody who should be benefiting from your gift if you're not using it. Um, like what a sadness for the world if you're not pursuing your passion and your mission and your vision. And so I see my job is to help you uncover that and to override your imposter syndrome.
Oh, amen to that, 100%.
Jocelyn, you have had a very interesting career that has led you to where you are today. So you want to talk a little bit about that because I think it's often this instance where we think that we have to be on a path, climb
Right.
that ladder, and get to that ultimate destination. And I think each of us on this call would say that that has not been the case for us at all in our own careers. It's more like a jungle gym where you're kind of reaching for different rungs of this contraption. And so tell us a little bit about how you got to this place where you are today, where you are bringing to life data and insights in this really powerful way to fuel the work that we do for our clients.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always wanted to be everything. Because I grew up with a mother who was a makeup artist, so and she had her own business. So there was the creative side of me, and then my father was like a straight up nerd computer engineer working for corporate America. And so I sort of always sort of dared to be anything that I wanted to be. And I sort of coined this term in high school that I call slash careerism, which is I was like, I want to be a writer slash actor slash dancer slash fashion designer slash national photographer. National Geographic photographer. Like I actually did want to do that for a long time. Still kind of do. And so I had all these things that I wanted to be and try when I grew up. And ultimately, before I came to New York for college, I decided I was going to be a fashion designer. That I was going to lean into that one, that slash career. And so while I was doing that in school, I was doing like fashion internships and all of that. I also was kind of trying to go after the other slash careers at the same time. So I was like an extra in movies for a while. I actually started my own photography business and got to do stills photography on sets of movies and indie films. I was a blogger at some point. Like, I've done all these different things. And I was able to sort of say like, hey, okay, well, I've tried that and that's not for me. I can't work in fashion. That doesn't work for me. Or whatever the reasoning was. But I was still along the way on that path. So just sort of trying everything that I wanted to try and be like, okay, I tried that, check it off the list, right? And so I actually just like by luck or chance was already sort of taking steps into the comms and the agency world with what I was doing, with the job that I was doing. I started off sort of a very research specific company while I was actually still in school, working for a company that did media measurement. And so I was, trying on different kinds of research. What different methodologies could I learn more about? Do I want to do primary research, which is like surveys or focus groups and all of that? And I just kept being really curious about the industry that I was working in and how I can learn more about what we do. And then at some point I got really even more curious about understanding, people like humans, like psychology of people, what makes them tick, what they care about. And as part of that process, I was like, we have a whole system or a process for how we plan strategically within communications, and the strategy and the creative side of that is sort of the other end of the spectrum from research and insights. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting really curious about the strategy and creative side of things. How do I do that? So I just kept raising my hand for new opportunities, being curious, always just sort of being ready to learn and try something and potentially even fail fast if I had to, right? If I tried something and it didn't work, okay, shifting focus to the next thing. But it really started with a curiosity and a desire to do and be everything, and then not having any fear around trying all the things I want to be, and not regretting not having tried either.
I love the notion of a slash career. I've not heard that before, but I saw somebody else in the chat say that they also have slash careerism. So that is incredible. And it now better tells me why and how you bring so much creativity to your role at the agency, Jocelyn, because you have all of these different experiences that have really shaped you and fueled your curiosity. And I definitely experienced that in the work that you do today.
Yeah.
Sari, tell us a little bit about your journey into entrepreneurship. Did you always want to be an entrepreneur and start your own business? Tell us a little bit more about your journey.
No, I am incredibly risk averse, and never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. In fact, looked at people who were entrepreneurs and thought they were wild risk takers and good for them. And we need that energy in the world, but it's not my energy. I grew up, as I said, in an Indian family, very model minority, right? Like pay your taxes, do your job, save 15, like all those things. And so becoming an entrepreneur was not on my bingo card at all. But while working at Facebook, I experienced some pretty severe burnout and also felt like I'd hit a ceiling, which I think a lot of folks might be able to relate to. So I'd had the kind of career where like I was very aggressively promoted. I was always considered a rock star. Facebook was the first time that I had real power and influence, right? Like I was senior, I controlled a significant budget, I could gate projects. And it was the first time in my career that I started to receive feedback that I lacked influence, that I was difficult to work with, things that I had always very much prided myself on, right? That I was great at influence. I'd always been praised for my ability to bring teams together, solve difficult problems, handle difficult clients. This was my superpower. So it was incredible for me to get this feedback, really daunting, like decimated my sense of self-worth. And I started talking to my team. I had a really big team there. I started talking to people who reported to me, and I was hearing something different. They were saying I was supportive. I had the highest, team satisfaction scores. And so I realized this feedback was coming from peers, and that this was very typical for women who in the workplace who finally started to get influence and power, right? There's a great article from Pet to Threat. It focuses specifically on Black women, and it talks about how when they're junior in their careers, everyone loves to mentor a Black woman, but as soon as she has a voice and power and influence, she becomes a threat. And I was seeing this kind of feedback coming to people on my team too. So there was a woman on my team of Indian descent, and I kept hearing that she, was a poor communicator. And I was like, do you mean she has an accent? Or a Black woman who, just was uncollaborative in meetings, didn't help move projects forward. And it turned out that she just told the lead engineer that the data he had was incorrect in a meeting, and he didn't like, as he put it, being humiliated in front of the team. And I was like, that's on her. And as I said, I experienced pretty severe burnout. I reached a place where my health had given out, my mental and my physical health. I slipped the disc in my back. And I needed to reconsider what I was doing with my life. And I hadn't taken my own advice, which is set a 5-year plan. I'd been sort of drifting along. I no longer had a passion for product marketing, but it was all I felt like I knew how to do. And when I left to start my own company, it was very intentional about lifting up women of color. I had no idea where it was going to go. And I kind of just bootstrapped and started in my bedroom. And at the time, of course, everyone in my community was like, this is nuts. You're walking away from so much money, because obviously the salaries in tech are incredible. You have a chance to advance your career. I was doing really well because I was working 70 hours a week. But what I want to say is that if you're thoughtful and you're intentional and you take calculated risks, and I think this is one of the, there's a few pillars or, things that I'm like, if you take away just three things from Career Compass, one of them is that every decision, except having a kid, every decision is reversible. I mean, you can't reverse that. Believe me, I've tried a couple of times at 4 a.m. in the morning. Uh, every decision
Still
is
with you,
reversible.
still with you.
Worked out.
And so if you're not happy, like your life is a beautiful experiment. Try something different. If it doesn't work out, you still have the same skills. You can still come back and do this thing that's making you unhappy. But if you're not happy, right, like radical responsibility for your life. Like nobody should care more than you. And so I walked away and I thought, I can't keep doing this. So I got to try something different. And 7 years later, we are a multi-million-dollar company that I started in my bedroom. And this brown girl on a green card counts the American military as a client. So I think there is something to be said about listening to what it is that you're meant to be doing in the world, and then finding that the stars will align for you when you do.
I just love that. It always just makes my heart palpitate and gives me a lot of inspiration and emotion. Sorry, I've heard this story before and I could hear it over and over again because it's a real example of how truly taking the time to know your purpose can lead you to this place that opens up opportunities that you had no idea existed for you. And so I'm proud of you and I'm proud to have you in my circle.
Same.
Going back to something that you shared as part of that story in terms of the feedback that some of the women of color were getting inside of the organization about how they were showing up, whether it be that they spoke with an accent or they were confrontational. I'm seeing some things in the chat here about how hard it is to be a woman of color in the workplace. And so this question is for both you and Jocelyn. It's like, what advice do you have for people of remaining true to who you are and showing up authentically in the workplace while also understanding how to navigate your career successfully and get the opportunities that you're seeking? Because there is a balance that you have to strike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can start. As part of my career, I've been the only Black woman in the room a lot of times, too many, right? And I guess at some point I got used to it, but I think there hit a point, and maybe it was in 2020 or something around there, where I was like, you know what? I want to bring my whole self to work. And where I was working at that time, this is pre my WE experience, was sort of giving us the okay and the right to sort of bring ourselves or our whole selves to work. And that was sort of unheard of at that point, right? So, I really decided that I wanted to, whatever I was trying to do, and I was working and doing some DE&I related work then as well. So I started to like lean into that passion out loud, sort of extracurricularly outside of my sort of research and analytics job. And the more that I did that, the more visible I became in the agency. It was like, oh, okay, people see me and know that I've done good work. Now I have license to do and be what I need to be. And so I was able to sort of be more visible, advocate for myself, which you'd be surprised. People that I've worked with and that have, reported into me, I've done work with and sort of talking about like, what are your career development goals? What do you want to be when you grow up, right? And carving time specifically for that, like once a month or once a quarter or however often it was. And I'd say, well, what do you want to do? And they would say, oh, I have no idea, like Sari mentioned, but also too, it's like, that you have to advocate for yourself, right? And it was like, oh no, I could never, I didn't know that I could, or it seems too scary to do. And I was like, I get that. I was scared for a long time. And then at one point I said, you know what? I'm good at my job. Everyone can see that. And so now I'm going to ask for what it is that I need. And like for me, I asked to become a strategist, and I pushed and made that work for myself. So dream big, whatever it is that you want to do, any of your slash careers or things you want to try or learn, go after those things. You're not going to be able to manifest it until you get really clear about what it is that you want, and then get intentional about how you're acting or taking actions to get to that point. I believe in goal setting, right? We did that as part of this Career Compass program, but making sure that you are setting goals that are, very specific, that you can achieve, like push yourself a little bit, but like that you can achieve as well. And then you sort of put yourself on a timeline or deadline so that you're forced into like making actions and taking action to do those things. And also, as we've been talking about, like, don't be afraid to fail fast. If you try something that you think that you like, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's not really for me, I'm not interested in that anymore. Listen to that gut reaction, because it's telling you something that's true and real, that's authentic for you. Take the learnings from whatever that was, and shift focus in a different direction. It's okay to fail fast. It's okay if, when you're doing that and working toward the things that you're interested in, that if it looks a bit messy when you're doing that, that's okay. Like, it's your career, it's your journey. Do it however you want. But like, just make sure that you are sort of standing up for yourself as much as you can. I know it can be sometimes challenging depending on who and where you're working with. But remember that you bring a lot to the table, no matter what anyone else tells you, and you have a right to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. What advice do you have, Sari?
So I think a lot of us grew up with, again, tell me if this is you, but I had, like I keep saying, migrant parents, very tiger parents, right? You can't quit. You wanted to do this, you can't quit. So I decided I hated tennis, and they were like, nope, you chose tennis, you can't quit. And we bring that mindset as an adult of like, I don't want to quit. And the energy that I teach my son is, you have to meet your commitments, but you've started something, you've tried it, and you now have new information, you're allowed to change your mind. But you needed that information in order to understand whether it was for you or not. And so if you can reframe experimentation and failure as data gathering, it can be really helpful, right? Like, now you have data that you didn't have before, and you can move forward in a different direction or in the same direction. So for Jocelyn, she tried it and she loved it. And if she didn't like it, she can move back, right? And she has new information now that that path is not the right path for her, and she can explore other things, but it's all data. And especially as an entrepreneur, if you don't embrace that mindset, you will get stuck really quickly. And I think the other thing is that really successful people invest in themselves. So what are you doing to invest in yourself? Like, are you joining organizations? Are you one of the things that I did was, I could have started and tried to do everything on my own, but instead I was like, I want to get up to profit as fast as possible. So I hired a business coach. I hired someone to do my website. I hired someone to help figure out my pitch document so that I could start pitching straight away, right? Like, I could have been doing it all in Canva myself, or I could just hire a professional, get it done quickly. I could have figured out all the business systems on my own, but I hired someone to help me get there faster. And if you look at how athletes work, how top performers work, like, they've all got coaches, they've all got investments in themselves. And I see so many people reluctant to make that investment in themselves. And yes, you can absolutely do it on your own, but you can circumvent a lot of the mistakes, and you can build your community a lot faster if you figure out ways to invest in yourself, whatever that looks like for you, like wherever your skills gaps are. If you feel like you don't know how to influence or advocate for yourself, pay for a course that will teach you that. If you feel like you have a really frustrating relationship with your manager, figure out who manages up really well and hire them and pick their brain for a couple of hours, right? Like, whatever. I do that all the time. I'm like, I know this isn't your thing, but can I pay you for 2 hours of your time? Because I want to talk to you about something very specific. And some of those pay out really big. It's how I have my first investor was a woman named Indra Nui, who's the former CEO of PepsiCo, and it literally started like that. So
No big deal.
Yeah, right.
Just the former
As you're
CEO of
talking
PepsiCo.
okay, wow.
yeah.
There was a question in here, sorry, building on your notion of like invest in yourself and pay for the resources you need to get up and running. Somebody said, how do you do that, particularly now when inflation is so high and people are just trying to piece together the day to day? What are some maybe lower cost ways that people can surround themselves with the expertise they need to get up and running?
Yeah. People are so incredibly generous with their or can be so incredibly generous with their time. So if somebody's interesting to you, like reach out to them on LinkedIn and just say like, "Hi, I love what you're posting. I want to make some new connections. Is it okay if I set up some time with you?" People will say no, people will say yes. Don't take the no's personally. Rejoice in the yeses and like build your network that way. There's also, I think, so many free networking events and things that you can join to help build your network out. And then start close to home. Like, who's in your own company? I'm sure that if you're feeling like lost and alone and an island, there are other people that you work with in the same career stage as you. Reach out to them, whether it's through an employee resource group or whether you send out a few personal emails and say, you guys want to get together once a month and talk through our work challenges and see if we can help each other and start our own little, like, kind of like career peer network, right? There are lots of ways that you can do it at a lower cost or no cost at all. And there are lots of people looking for connection.
And what
Yeah, I have definitely found that in my own career. You'd be surprised if you just ask, people will share. And if they don't, that's okay too. The worst thing that could happen is you could get a no. Have you tried that, Jocelyn, reaching out to somebody?
Oh yeah, and I'm like really unabashed about like talking to strangers. So that's, helped me out a lot in terms of not even just sort of online, but also in person at some of those networking opportunities. Like I will be like, "Hi, how are you?" It could be the CEO of a company, and I'm like, "Oh, if we're next to each other, I'm going to introduce myself to that person." I don't. That's not how everyone feels though, but I have worked with people. I'm like, "Hey, we're at a networking event. Go meet one new person or two new people. Go
Mhm.
bye." And it's terrifying, but you start the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. And I will say also too, like social media is there. Look up YouTube videos about how to do certain things. There's so many different ways
Yeah.
to get access to free resources, and just talking to people, like we've said, it goes a lot farther than you would think.
Absolutely. Well, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to go to the Q&A box because we've got some questions that have queued up in there. The first one is, what advice do you have for someone who's not finding success from networking but wants to? Is there any advice of what you all did in your career journey to make it work for you? Networking's hard. It's really hard, especially if you're an introvert. So what tips do you have for how to do that successfully?
You know what? It's been a journey for me too. I think I started off really shy, right? Because I had a lot of imposter syndrome myself earlier in my career. And, what I really focused on was trying to do the best job I possibly could and letting that speak for me. And the ways I was able to do that were just within my certain career at the time, showing up and as curious, showing up as, willing to be a team player. That can be sort of difficult sometimes when some people are not kind of carrying their own weight, of course. But I think that was sort of speaking for me. And as I got more comfortable with people seeing me as someone who could do a good job, I was a bit more confident in the way I was approaching networking. Also talking to, again, like doing it on a smaller scale. So like if you got a friend group who have different jobs in different industries, so, who do you know that's really interesting? Or how do I get a mentor? Having a mentor is very important. It's been a part of my journey. I've had some really amazing bosses and leaders, as well as external mentors that I've said, hey, I'm interested in you. Would you mind spending an hour with me, talking me through some questions that I have about how do I level myself up in my career? So it's a little bit of a sort of multi pronged approach to it, but start wherever you are. Don't feel like you need to become something that you're not right away. Build up your confidence, because it really comes down to confidence, right? A lot of the time, because I ask for bunch of things I probably shouldn't ask for. But to Sari's, point, like people actually do want to help you more often than not. So at least make the effort to try. And if not, you find someone else and ask them.
But people also want to help you, Jocelyn, because you're amazing. Like
Well,
with the energy you bring and the joy that you bring and the service that you offer others. And I think sometimes networking feels like going to an event and sticking a sticker with your name on it and holding a $2 glass of wine and, shuffling around. And that's not how networking actually works, right? Like everyone you work with is part of your network. And good networking just looks like actually caring about people.
yeah.
Like, how are you caring for the people in your community? And they will be the most amazing network for you. Like, are you celebrating their wins? They're a really simple way. Like, I see an article that I think will be interesting, I'll forward it. A book that I think somebody will enjoy reading, I send it to them. Um, a win that they post on LinkedIn, I'm celebrating it. I'm so happy for them. And the other thing about networking is people are really afraid to ask. And most of the time, if you make the ask, people are good. It's about sifting through who in your community is a connector and who isn't. So there are people that are not connectors who, if you ask them, they'll be like, why are you asking me this? That's okay. That's fine. They're just not your people. Don't worry about it. And then there are people who, somebody says to me, I don't know if I am interested in what I'm doing right now. I'm thinking about switching to product marketing. And my brain is immediately like, who do I know? They haven't even asked me, and my brain is like, who do I know in product marketing? Who can I connect them with who'll be able to tell them more so they can learn and decide whether it's something they want? Be that person, because the more that you serve other people, the more willing people are to serve you. And so networking, like everything, starts with you. And what are you doing for your community that makes them want to invest in you? I did a fireside chat yesterday with Valerie Jarrett, who was Obama's longest serving advisor, a Black woman. And she said, it's not enough to do your job well. You also have to make people believe that you're worth the investment. And that's what it is. Make people believe that you're worth the investment by investing in them.
I
That's what I
love
was getting
that.
at. You said that much more eloquently than I said it, but absolutely.
Yeah, and I have found, because I can be a little bit of a introvert, extrovert, I have found for me it is most comfortable to reach out to my network to broker those introductions for me. I might not just do a cold call to somebody that I don't know, but I'll scan through my network to see who knows that person and then that person. And before you know it, you realize what a small world we live in, because so many of our people are connected to the folks that we want to get closer to. So if networking is not your thing, start out with the group of people that you feel most comfortable with and ask them to open some doors for you.
Yeah.
And Charmaine says, like, I'm having these amazing in-person conversations, and then they go nowhere after the follow-up, right? Like, everyone's busy. You don't have to be best friends with everyone in your network. It's okay to be like, hey, we met a year ago at ColorComm. I'm reaching out because I'm now, unemployed and I'm looking for new work. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share, 30 minutes with me so I can talk about, I love that you talked about resume skills, whatever it is. You don't have to like be their best friend. That's not what you can't be best friends with everyone in your network.
That's right. All right, next question is for you, Sari. How did you manage upskilling rapidly without burning out? I'm in my early 20s and have been promoted to a senior manager title.
Mm-hmm. I figured out what it was that I needed to do to be successful at that point in time, and didn't think about the next step until I felt like I'd mastered where I was at. So what was I missing, right? And again, like great coach, tons of feedback, talk to my manager regularly about where my gaps were, talk to my team regularly about where my gaps were, and tried to figure out like, what do I need to do to master where I am right now? What's missing? What am I good at? And what are some things that I probably need to know, but I'm not interested in learning? And how can I build a team around me that will like help cover those gaps? And that's how I run my company now too, right? Like I'm not detail oriented. The first person I hired was an operations person because I was like, I can't figure it out. And it sucks up so much energy and time. And so when you think about upskilling, like what is it, where are your biggest gaps that are preventing you from success? I think the other thing that will help you figure that out is to set really clear KPIs. You can't do everything all the time. So knowing what your manager thinks of as success so that you have the same definition. And I'll give you an example. I was coaching where I worked with both the team and I did one-on-one coaching with the leader of that team. And there was a young man on that team, and he'd received feedback that he lacked leadership. And so he was doing everything to show that he'd mastered leadership, right? Like he was running a creative lunch and learn every month for the team. They were a creative graphic art director, graphic designer team. So he was doing that. He ran book club. He helped with the offsite. And he fully expected to get promoted. Didn't, got the same feedback that he lacked leadership. And he was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I can't believe I've gotten this feedback. So I spoke to his manager and I said, he's been doing everything that you've asked. Why is he getting this feedback? And she said he comes to every meeting and it's a mess. Every meeting I've attended that he's run, there's no agenda, there's no next steps, there's no outcomes. I have no idea what's going on. I feel like everyone leaves. And I was like, are you telling me that all he needed to do to demonstrate leadership was give you an agenda for the meeting beforehand? And she was like, yeah, I think that would have really helped. They just didn't ever talk about what leadership looked like. And so making sure that when you set your KPIs with your manager, right? Like if they say, I need you to have better communication, or I need you to demonstrate strategic leadership, you're being very clear about what that means to them so that you can meet that expectation, because those words are so vague that they could mean something completely different to you than it does to them. And that will help you focus on the right skills and the right activities.
I absolutely love that. We recently went through an alignment exercise with a group of leaders at where we were given a list of words, and each of us had to spend 2 minutes writing down what our definition of that word was. And then we shared back with one another. And you'd be surprised how much miscommunication there is and how somebody defines quality versus someone else. So I do think it's really important to get clear about how success is going to be measured and what that looks like in practice.
Yeah.
I have a question here for you, Sari. After working in marketing for my whole career, I've recently been on the receiving end of negative feedback, aggressive, difficult to connect with, need to work on soft skills. I've been burned by this experience. How do I build back my confidence?
Yeah. Firstly, Sharon, I'm really sorry. That can be really devastating, and you can carry that with you for a long time, and it can impact how you move through the world and communicate. And that kind of feedback can be really tough. I would start by parsing out what is the kernel of truth there, or what is the helpful thing that I can take from this, right? Because everything starts somewhere. And if the helpful thing is that this is the perception of me, then that's fine, right? But like take that as it is. Like what is between the lines here that I can actually fix and move on from? When I get feedback like that, or when clients get feedback like that, I usually say, can you share with me an impact, right? Like, what is the impact? So for example, like if you think that I lack influence, can you give me an example? What was the impact there? If you think I lack communication skills, right? Like, what was the impact? Has there been a time when a client said they didn't understand what I was sharing? Or has there been a time where a team member was confused with the direction that I gave them? So making sure that you're parsing out the bias from the feedback is also really helpful. And then in terms of building back your confidence, I think keeping a cheer doc, which everyone should be doing, by the way, keeping a cheer doc, every single piece of feedback that you get, positive reinforcement. And even if it's something as simple as like, great job running that meeting, right? Somebody says it to you in the hallway after a meeting, you write that down, and that becomes a proof point for your leadership skills. and using that cheer doc as like hard data-driven evidence of how good you are at your job. And then you should have your cheer circle, like call your girlfriends and be like, I'm feeling really garbage. And they will tell you how pretty and wonderful and kind and awesome you are. And you will feel better because that's what I do. Um, uh, and my circle of girlfriends are, I always say to my husband that he's my bestie, but he's not my everything. Nor should he be, right? That's too much pressure on one person. But my girlfriends have known me since the third grade. So having that community, like building your community of cheerleaders, and it doesn't have to be huge, right? Even just one or two other people.
Yeah, somebody to lift you up. I like the notion of a cheer doc. I call that a kudos folder. I make
I was
all
gonna
of my
say
direct reports have a kudos folder to make sure that they're saving that stuff because it's easy to forget all the goodness that you have created and brought into an organization and easy to ruminate on that one piece of feedback that you received. I mean, I've definitely had that experience in my own career where I'm so laser focused on the thing that somebody didn't like about how I showed up. And so how do we make sure that we are keeping those things in perspective and boosting ourselves up in those moments? All right, we're almost at time, but I want to get to this question from Kelly in the chat, and I'm going to put it to you, Jocelyn. If we don't have a connection or sponsor to help open doors at upper mid-career search and cold networking isn't working, how can we break through all of the noise to get noticed by the right recruiters and hiring managers?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question because right now it's a little bit tough, I feel like, in the job market. I've heard from friends who have been looking for jobs and trying to break through. Um, I think it really, in terms of how to break through, it is, again, like, what's your personal story, right? So that's part of what we learned in Career Compass. You have to remember that you are selling yourself. And so the whole story, like complete story, is important. So of course the skills that you have, the experience that you have, and what you've achieved is important, but like, who are you as a person as well? What do you care about? What do you bring to the table that's maybe above and beyond someone else who has, this certificate and, this skill, or all of those things, right? Think about yourself as a well-rounded person. I think is really important because, like, it's so easy to get caught up in these, with recruitment. Like, you go through these, I don't know what the programs are called, but like your resume goes there and you don't see it all, right? It's the standing out is really like, what have you done? Who are you as a person? What are you trying to get to? Like, what is that role that you're dreaming about, that you're really excited about? And then how have you sort of made an impact, like the value that you've brought to your previous roles? And it can be sort of scary because you think that, oh, I don't want to say that I've done XYZ, or that's too braggadocious, but like, brag, just do it, right? Like, again, like, you have brought value to the roles that you're in, no matter what, right? And you take a moment to sort of celebrate those wins, because it can be easy to, as Elizabeth said, to kind of keep going. You achieve something and you keep going, and then you forget that you've already done so much. So give yourself that credit, when you're pulling together your resume, pulling together your cover letter, and also show your excitement and passion. I think people used to feel like that wasn't professional to do. But people really like when someone's passionate about something, and that's, I feel like, tends to give you an edge if you're not afraid to kind of show that.
I love that. I love that. Any
Can I
any
just
quick words of
add?
advice? Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, just ask. Like, make sure
Yeah.
that if you want something, that you're asking everyone, right? Like, I email Career Compass people after the course and I'm like, hey, we operate on referrals. Please refer us.
Yes.
If you know somebody that, and I'm going to ask the same thing of you too. If you think your organization will benefit from Career Compass, please refer us. That's how we operate. Like, we work on referrals and on people sharing that they want us to come into their company. So make the ask. And like I said, there's going to be a portion of people that are like, who does she think she is? They're not your people. Don't worry about it. Everyone else will want to help you. They are your community. They are your network. So don't be afraid to make the ask.
Yeah.
Yes. Amen to that. All right. Well, we could go on and on in this conversation. I mean, we didn't even get to half of the questions that were in the chat. Please know that all three of us are on LinkedIn. You can hit us up. We can do follow-up conversations. Don't be shy. Ask if there's some questions that we didn't get to. I'm always happy to do a follow-up, and I know Sari and Jocelyn are willing to do the same. Thank you everyone for joining our conversation today with We Communications and ColorComm. If you are not a member of ColorComm yet, you can save $250 on membership for the next 24 hours. So you can find the details in the chat for that. And again, thank you, Sari and Jocelyn, for all of the wisdom and insight that you shared today. I'm just such a firm believer in both of you and how you have approached your careers with intention. So thank you for serving up inspiration to me as well.
If every organization had an Elizabeth Herrera Smith, the
Yes.
world would be a better place. Somebody who just cares so deeply about equity and inclusion and people and human beings. We're so lucky to have you.
Yes, we
I
are.
really appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Thank you all. And we'll see you in LinkedIn.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.